And again, before you bake, we're just going to say a general rule of thumb is you always should triangulate the model before you bake it. Okay? At a studio, that might not always be the case for you. And the reason why is whoever is the lead or senior technical artist probably has all your tools synced in the pipeline. So at work, we don't triangulate before we bake because all our tools are synced together to triangulate exactly the same. So when we bake out our things, the baking tools that we use are set to triangulate the same way our engine triangulates. So we never have to. Okay. Wouldn't do any. I don't think it would do anything bad per se because the engine has to triangulate to be able to render. But once you do triangulate, it does make altering that model much more difficult because you're not in quads or in a cleaner form of geometry that allows you to change and update quickly. Once it triangulates, it's very hard to go out there and go in there and recut things or remanipulate that geo in any way. So before I triangulate, typically what I do is I dupe my model and I move an extra spare to the side. So if I ever want to go back to it, I can without all the extra triangulation that happens. And the thing is Maya does have an option to undo triangulation called quadriangulate right here. And rest assured, it doesn't really work all that well, especially due to the fact that I have put in triangles already. If this was modeled in all edge loops in proper quads, it would undo the triangulation the right way. But on this type where I have purposely put triangles in after I've triangulated and tried to untriangulate, it would totally screw up your model. Okay? So I just usually save a copy before this. I'm going to select my model and shift right click. I'm going to go ahead and triangulate that. And when you triangulate, all your triangulation should, if you have toggled on your hard and soft edge display, you should notice all the triangulation is always soft. Okay. And let's just go ahead and take a look at some of these things. After that triangulation, you can see, maybe I didn't notice this before, but I'm starting to notice there's a little bit of a gradient happening in here, and also on the side there's some gradient that I didn't notice before. And once I triangulated, it's really showing up, which probably means that I have classified some edges improperly or just missed them, right? So if you see this gradient, see that right there, pulling, see that? And I'm willing to bet that there's an edge here that's soft that shouldn't be. So if I just select this one edge, harden that edge the way it should be, it looks like that's a lot nicer. And then right here it's really bad too. I think this is what John might have been pointing out, is I missed quite a few actually. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and harden those. And I'm just going to double check around this real quick. Okay, I think the rest of that looks pretty solid. So you can see that it's fixed the gradient issues. Okay, so that looks fine. So that's just the triangulation. I also double checked my edges. I'm now going to do the same thing on the bottom. I just want to go ahead and check this. I can't see what edges are hard and soft on the bottom, so I'm going to shift right click, soft and hard, and I'm going to toggle soft and hard edge display on so I can see the dotted lines. And I'm just going to roll around this real quick and check. I think this edge can be hard too. Okay. I think everything looks pretty good there. Yes.
I see that you took out the circular part inside the hinge. Should we keep that in? Or?
Yeah, you should. Yeah, I don't have to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I would have a cube, something there, so it's just not floating, that little circular part. So yeah, you should have a little circular part there, and then also on your lid, you should have a low poly representation of the hook as well. Okay? Now, when we get ready, I'm just going to go ahead and put this one on another layer. Okay? My extra. Now, with this, I need this to have to be set up a certain way. You can bake out all your maps all at once, but to do that, anything that's really kind of close together, you have to explode out. You have to give it space. So you need to select this, kind of move this out of the way to make sure that there's room for it to project in between these two objects. If I baked out my object like this, okay, I guess what would you expect the inside of this to look like? Really dark, right? You're probably going to also see that the keyboard would show up on the lid, and the information from the lid would probably show up on the keyboard. They would burn into each other, essentially. Okay. Typically speaking, I don't explode my model in a way to bake out multiple parts at a time. The way I do it is I bake them out in parts. So I'll bake out the lid and the base separately because, in a way, it gives me more flexibility. If for some reason that I have too much bleed off on part of my edges, I can always go into Photoshop and trim that down a little bit before it creeps into the other UV space, and then I will just combine them in Photoshop. If, say for instance, I get a really nice bake on the top, but not the bottom, I just need to redo the bottom, right? And then I can combine them together. So flexibility, and just gives me more options. Okay. So with that said, what I want to do is I'm going to select both of these and delete the history. And I'm going to go ahead and hide these for a moment. And I need to prepare the base. Now, keep in mind that the low lid, so this low lid, look where its pivot is. Okay? It's at the origin, right? The high poly lid is on the side so I can bend it, right? That's probably going to be a problem. The high poly and your low poly should basically occupy the exact same space. You also need to make sure that all these numbers are zeroed out in one. So, if you need to freeze it, freeze the model, and then delete the history. You want to make sure these are all zeroed, and their pivots should match the same space. So if you have one object that's located here, and then you're trying to bake it out and the other object's over here, it's not going to match up. It's going to lead to some huge projection problems. They basically need to be on top of themselves, okay? Which these are, but the pivot's not, so it's going to relocate when I export. So I'm going to move this pivot to the center, like so.
So wait, how do you change it on the high layer, or the high poly?
What's that?
Because then we put it in render, or how do you recenter the pivot on that one?
How do you recenter a pivot?
That did.
No, I mean I can't select my high layer.
What?
My high poly.
Do you have it on render?
Yeah. So I'm just.
So
saying.
how do you change the render option so you can select stuff?
So we should just have it all the way off.
Yeah, if you need to select it, yeah. So I have this lid here, ready to roll, and it's in place. And up until this point, all we've been doing is on these models to see what they look like when they smooth is we've been just pushing the 3 key, right? That actually doesn't add any geo. All it does is give you a nice little preview of what it's going to look like when it does smooth. But now we actually need to add some geo for when we export it. So I'm going to have this selected. I'm going to go shift right click, and I'm going to say I want to smooth you. So I'm going to say smooth. And and so that actually added geo. You can see the geo has been dense. And you can either smooth it once, or if you want, I might hit G and smooth it one more time. So we're at 200,000 polys. And you can see that actually added more geo. I want to see if I like that.
So are we selecting it with the not with the
I am to demonstrate something, but it probably should be done this way. Yes.
I forget what they're called, but when we were messing with how faces were facing, I don't remember how to remove these.
Just toggle off your poly display.
How do I? Okay, there we go.
Find it?
I think so. There.
Okay.
There we go.
So I just smoothed this once. This is 50,000 polys. Okay. This guy's ready to go. I'm going to delete its history, and now I'm going to hide it. I'm going to bring in the base, and I'm going to bring in the. Actually, let me bring in the speaker. Okay. I'm going to combine the speakers real quick. These have been combined. You'll notice after you combine something that it deletes it, removes it from the layer. So I'm going to re-add these to that layer real quick. Now I have the base and the keyboard. I'm going to select all these. Okay. And I'm going to combine these together. And the reason why I'm combining these separate is I think I want to run 2 smooths on my base and only 1 smooth on my mouse pad and speakers. I don't want this thing to blow up to like 10 million polys, so I'm going to smooth them separately. It looks like this key still is being obnoxious, so I'll just select it and kind of move it back into place real quick. Just eyeball it. I'm okay with that. Okay. So here's the bottom and part of the laptop, and I'm going to smooth this. There we go. There's 1 smooth. This will take a little bit. It's a lot more geo. Okay. That doesn't look too bad. You'll notice from 1 smooth that this is still not. If you look at some of these side parts where it was round, that's still not completely round at some of these parts. So if I go and if I'm feeling brave, I can go ahead and smooth that one more time and pump it up to about 4 or 5 million.
But don't you just smooth that round part separately?
That would be a better choice, right? So I mean, those are things to take into consideration. You know, I have. You know, at home I use a workstation at home. I'm usually not too worried about poly counts. I can easily push, 30 million without a problem. When I get up above, 30, my kind of has a fit, but I can usually go between 20 and 30, no problem. So I personally don't really worry about it too much. Okay, so you can, and this is, this thing's handling it just fine. I'm at almost 5 million, and I'm still, I'm not experiencing any lag. I'm still rocking 60 to 100 frames. Boom. Look at that.
That's why I sang it before.
Okay. So now I'm going to bring in the speakers, and the reason why these are a lot of polys, I'm only gonna smooth these once. So I'm just gonna smooth these one time. This will bump it up to about 1 million, I'm guessing, yep. Okay, but that's still, I think that's still gonna look pretty good. You can see these, again, these are not perfectly round. I would actually have to smooth these at least one more time. But I think for what we're doing, demo-wise, this will be good enough. I'm now gonna select both of these, and I'm going to combine these. And I think we'll be alright. P.S. When you're doing these things, you probably should have your power supply plugged in or you're not going to get optimal performance. Yeah, again, when you're working on Maya sucks a lot of energy, RAM, and processing. You should not have excessive amount of other applications open, and you should be plugged in. Yes?
So, I haven't even smoothed anything yet, and it's terribly slow. Trying to just, like, zoom. Like, I can't even do anything really.
Turn off the edit.
Huh?
So, sometimes it will be slow. Check your task manager, see how much RAM you're sucking up right now. See what else you have going on that are open. I said I'm using the same machines you guys are, and I'm at almost 6 million polys, and I'm still getting. You can see it's very responsive. It's not bad at all. Okay. So I mean, depends on. Sometimes maybe it will take a few more.
You said to smooth the bottom twice and then the speakers once?
If you want to, like around like some of the circle areas. I mean, if your machine's having some issues handling it, maybe just smooth the bottom once. You know, I like the round stuff to look round, so I kind of smooth it twice. Probably at home, I probably smooth this 3 times. You know, just depends what you want to do. Again. Probably the stuff that you guys would be modeling on the building, the high poly stuff, is probably not going to be 5-6 million polys on your high poly models. So you're probably not going to run into any of these problems. Yeah, Carl?
Just a question. On the speakers, since the holes in the speakers are so small, does it really matter not whether they're actually completely round? If no one really ever look at something like that close.
Yeah, exactly. It probably doesn't matter because it depends how close the player's going to get in conjunction to what size texture map you have, right? Because if this texture map is only 512, well, each one of these is essentially a square pixel anyways, right?
Yeah.
So that's something to take into consideration when you're building your high poly stuff and etc. is how much detail are you actually going to be able to transfer over into your texture map based on the size of your map? Are you wasting time putting all this detail in that's not even going to project because your texture map is not large enough? Those are things to consider. I think we'll notice this detail. We're going to bake a 1K map. Okay? But if we baked out a 2K map, I guarantee this would show. You would notice. 2K has a ton of information. Or for film, we can do an 8K map if you really want to be here all day. Yeah.
So for our high poly model, I remember we're using the model that's uncompleted, so the bottom has like colors and stuff. Should we switch over and grab the completed model so then?
I probably would. You know, the FBX Bake 05 is the completed model. It's only 10 megs. Should be fine. Okay. So I have this thing ready to go. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to name my stuff. So I'm going to name this bottom high. Okay. I'm going to add that to this layer. And I'm going to call this lid high. Okay. So it looks like that's good to go. And let me hide that. This here is bottom low. Okay. And this here is lid low. Okay? So with only one selected, because I want to export them separately, I'm just going to select one, and I'm going to come over, I'm going to start with my low stuff, and I'm going to go File, Export Selection, right here. And now I'm going to find my folder. And I'm just going to stick these right here. This is just for demo purposes. Ideally, you would want to have a project, you'd have your project file set up, okay, you'd have your project set. By default, exported objects, regardless of what they are, Maya sticks them into the scene folder. Personally, I don't like that. My scenes are for my scenes. So typically what I do is I'll create a local transfer folder or an export folder. I'll just add my own folder. So I'd come to laptop and say, okay, well, right click, new folder, and I'd just call this exports. Okay? And this is where I would put all my in-between models, okay? Usually assets is where I will stick my final assets, and I'd have a folder in there for each asset with the object or the mesh, and then the correlating textures that go with that, the final textures, okay? So I try to keep it very clean that way. So if you want to, create it like this, and I'm just going to call this is lid low, so I'm going to export that as OBJ. If for some reason when you go to export you do not have the option for an OBJ, you have to enable it. Again, the way you do that is Window, Setting Preferences, Plugin Manager. Okay? Window, Setting Preference, Plugin Manager. And then you just scrub down until you get to OBJ Exporter, load and auto-load that. For some reason it's, a lot of times it doesn't auto-load. Check that and then you'll have the option to export an OBJ. Mine's good to go, so I'm just going to close that. I'm now going to export this guy, and this is the bottom. My last action was bringing up the export selected, so if you just go ahead and hit G, which is your, if that was your last action, I'll just pop that window back up for you. And notice it will bring it up to the spot where I put the last thing. So I'm just going to click on this and just type in bottom low, and I'm going to export that. Okay.